What's up guys, welcome back to the channel and to today's video. So, you've made it through Blue Monday. However, a lesser known day is January the 17th, which is today. And that, unfortunately, is quite morbidly nicknamed Quitter's Day. Because it is the day in the year, in January, when we tend to lose about 50% of people who started well-intentioned New Year's resolutions, whether they're around health or finances or relationships or whatever they may be. It gets to the point where, a little bit like I talked about the last couple of days, where you've been doing the thing but not necessarily seeing the fruits of your labor, and our brain finds it very difficult to continue to do something when it doesn't have that reward loop, because habits are loops. We have cues, we have routines, we have rewards. And when we don't get the reward, it's very hard for the loop not to be broken. However, this is where, we talked about delayed gratification and, we all know this sort of basic stuff, but it's when you're in the thick of it and it's January and it's cold and dark and wet and snowing and all that crap outside, it's a lot harder in practice than it is in theory to just sort of knuckle down and stick with it. So, I don't want you to be one of those people who quits. I don't want you to be one of those 50% of people. And I certainly have no intention of quitting mine, which is why we are here and we're going to keep turning up. Today is day 15 of 100 of me recording these YouTube videos. If you're new to the channel, welcome. And that is why we are here. That's why we were doing this. And I'm going to use myself as an example and give you some tips and some tricks as to how you might be able to avoid quitting. If you are on the fence, if you're thinking about it, maybe you've slacked a couple of days or a day here or there. So I'm not going to be all super motivational and shouty and stuff like that. I'm just going to give you some practical, actionable advice and take it as you mean to. So let's take me doing this YouTube, this podcast as an example, right? 100 days in a row, sitting in front of a camera, coming up with semi-decent content, putting the effort in, then uploading it all of that stuff. It takes time, it takes energy, it takes motivation, all this stuff. It would be very, very, very easy for me to just sort of sack it off, basically. Do a couple of days because I said I would, and then, no one notices, no one's gonna give a shit. I'll just give up now, it's fine. And no one will care. All right? And that may be very true, but I would care, I would know. And I think we owe it to ourselves to hold ourselves accountable, not necessarily for external validation. So that's kind of point number one I want to make is try not to be doing your New Year's resolutions for any kind of external validation. If you are, going to the gym, for example, just check with yourself that you're doing it for the right reasons, because the external validation motivator is great in the short term. Take breakups, for example, right? Show me a man or a woman who is more motivated than someone who has just been dumped. They do not exist. You can go into a dark fucking place and you can just power through absolutely anything. You know what? It sucks having your heart broken. Sometimes I miss it because you just have unlimited motivation. You just go, you don't care. You just don't care. You're just like, I'm here, I'm doing it. But unless you're in that situation, training for that kind of external validation, it's very limited. It's because ultimately no one cares, right? No one cares. And getting comfortable with that is something that, especially when you put out a lot of content, you need to get used to. But it's something you do get used to when you do the content, but you still need to get used to it even if you don't. That's kind of the point I'm making. So try to avoid doing stuff for external validation is definitely point number one. Point number two is when I first started doing these 100 days of YouTube, it would be very easy for me to get overwhelmed by that. It's like, wow, bloody hell, 100 days in a row. Let me get the calculator, let me get the calendar out. Well, that's like the second week of April. Oh my God, we're only in the third week of January. Wow, I don't know, that seems like a long way off. That seems like a lot of effort. This is what happens with our goals, guys, is that whilst I'm very much in favor, like I've said multiple times, of having one big North Star goal for the year, it's very important that you break that down and try not to get overwhelmed by it. because it's finding that sweet spot of making it scary but achievable, right? And only you really know what that is. And if I was to look at it in the context of 100 days on day, well, what are we now? Day 15? No, day 16. Day 16. Sorry, I keep losing track of that. We're on day 16. It would be very easy for me to go, okay, I've done 16 days, but wow, like I'm not even a fifth of the way through. Okay, right, bloody hell. Nah, fuck it, I'll just give up, right? It's the same with your fitness, it's the same with your health, it's the same with your money. Just take it one day, one step at a time. When you're starting a business, this is another example I can relate to, and maybe some of you can. There is no right or wrong way to start. There's many forks in the road, there's many roads that you can take. It's so easy, and I think the vast majority of people are probably guilty of this, especially with their first business, of getting overwhelmed, because it's like, especially if you're listening, you're watching some YouTube advice or listening to podcasts about starting a business or something like that, very easy to get overwhelmed. Exactly the same with your fitness, right? You're scrolling on social media, your algorithm's starting to learn that you're, on a bit of a fitness hype, so you're getting more fitness content, but you're listening to 10, 20, 30 people, with all of them with conflicting opinions and points of view, and it's like, who do I listen to? Where do I start? What do I do? I don't even know. It's funny, I'm speaking to a guy later today, and he's written down that the struggle he has got is that he keeps starting things, doing it for 6 weeks, and then changing things up. You can guess what I'm going to say to him, right? It's that delayed gratification, and it's so funny. By him writing that down and admitting to that, he already knows what he's doing wrong. So a lot of the time when I'm struggling with stuff, I'll ask myself, well, what would I say to a client? What would I say to a friend? What would I say to a family member? And more often than not, it's a case of, well, come on, let's be realistic here. It's only been 16 days. 16 days seems like a lot. It's 16 days, man. But you could also reframe that. Be like, well, it's actually only been 16 days. Like, what were you expecting, kind of thing? Were you expecting parades? Were you expecting to get like some jacked, ripped body? Were you expecting to be a millionaire after 16 days? These things, they are literally reserved for the Disney movies, the fantasy world, right? These things don't happen. It takes time, it takes diligence, it takes consistency. It also takes doing it when no one cares and no one's watching, whether that's on YouTube or just generally speaking, right? You just have to keep going one step at a time. And that's the most important thing. If you're looking to lose weight, people come to me all the time. Doug, I want to lose 8 kilos. That's very specific. Why 8 kilos? And they have this objective vision, I suppose. When I weigh X number of kilos, my life is going to be perfect. So, okay, well, it's not. Soz. Hate to be a bearer of bad news here. But also, why don't you just lose 1 and see how you feel? Rather than losing 8 or 5 or 20 or 10 or gaining, whatever it might be, it doesn't matter. The point is, one step at a time, okay? So what we've covered there is don't get overwhelmed. The way to do that is to take one step at a time. And I can't remember my first point now, but you will have watched it, so you will know it. So there's a couple of real actionable steps there, guys, things you can do. Hopefully that is useful. I'm purposely trying to keep today's video a little bit shorter. It's easy to give up. It's hard to keep going. So if it feels like it's hard, you're doing it right. I think that's quite a nice way to end. So I'll love you and leave you for today. Keep going. Don't become part of the 50% that give up. You owe it to yourself. You're not doing, that was it, external validation. You're not doing this for external validation. You're not doing your goals for someone else, you're doing them for you. And if you are doing them for someone else, and be really honest with that about yourself, right? You don't have to admit it, just be honest with yourself. Doesn't mean you need to stop, you just need to reframe why you're doing it. Because if you're doing it for external validation, you're relying on motivation and willpower. Those are gonna run out. It's January, right? Things are gonna happen, the weather's gonna get in the way, or you're gonna get ill, or both. The double factor. It sucks, and unfortunately you just can't avoid it, right? And when that happens, we can deal with that another day. But they are things that can easily knock you off kilter and make you take the easy road. And life is basically just a series of forks in the road, just literally going from one junction to the next and deciding which exit to take, okay? And when you're doing these things, when you're considering giving up, all I ask is that you think about why you're thinking about giving up. Like actually think about it first. Okay? And the other thing to think about is don't see failure as such a linear thing. It's not binary. It's not a 1 or a 0. You know, messing up one day, messing up one thing does not mean you have failed. You know, we've all heard the Rocky quotes. It's not about how often you get knocked down, it's how much you get up, blah, blah, blah. But again, this stuff survives the test of time because it's so damn true. Guys, I love you. I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow, by the way, we are going to be talking, a little sneak preview. We're going to be talking about the fact that you will have gone through, by January the 18th, 5% of 2024. 5%, like that. So, we've got some juicy stuff covering up tomorrow.